Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I begin on the issues of this Opposition Day motion today, I just want to take the opportunity to thank the constituents of Medicine Hat, Carson, Warner for their support, the overwhelming support that returned me to this House. Thank you to the many volunteers who worked on my campaign, and I hope I will do justice in Ottawa for them and the Conservative team. And I want to thank my friends and family as well for their continued support. And just before I get in, I just wanted to make you aware, Mr. Speaker, that I am sharing my time today with my friend, the member from Wellington, Halton Hills. I rise today to address the motion put before the House, a motion that is timely and I wholeheartedly support, and that is the matter of China. This is an issue that has been mismanaged by the Prime Minister and the entire Liberal government to date. While all international issues are complex, and there are certainly deep connections in our industries to China as suppliers, manufacturers, consumers, and more, there are principles and values that should always be respected. All members of this House, Mr. Speaker, have taken an oath, and that oath is to ensure the safety and security of all Canadians. Now, we cannot ensure that safety and security if we ignore our duties and defer difficult choices. It is for that reason, and for the fact that the Liberal government has completely failed to act or lay out any strategy, that the Conservatives have brought forward a motion for the House, not the Prime Minister, this House, to determine the truth and way forward on Huawei, on China, and on ensuring that Canada can stand up for our values and our rights. Mr. Speaker, the evidence on why there is a security threat from China is public and available for all Canadians and parliamentarians to understand. The Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security heard from experts on threats facing Canada. To quote Ray Bossever, the former Assistant Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Agency, or Service, CSIS, on whether there is a threat from China, he said, and I quote, "There is also the issue that China is now in the age of self-admitted sharp power, and they exercise that power with very little reservations anymore. There is no longer even a question of hiding their intentions. They are taking a very aggressive approach around resources and intellectual property, and they are very clear in dealing with dissidents and academics. They've arrested some of them, and they've punished others, including academic institutions in North America, at their will. So I think there's a value challenge that Canadians have to consider, along with the economic opportunity discussion." End of quote. The sharp power that Mr. Bossever referred to has been reported in the news and highlighted in a number of articles. For example, Beijing has openly organized pro-communist regime protesters here in this country, in Canada. One such protest was led by a former Ontario Liberal cabinet minister who CSIS had raised concerns about, given his close ties to China. China has created pro-communist regime lobby groups like the Canadian Chinese Political Affairs Committee that publishes pro-China and pro-Huawei articles, suggesting that there was a wave of anti-China hate crimes and that Chinese Canadians were living in fear. These claims were made with the support and direction of the Chinese Consulate General in Toronto. These are not the actions of friends or allies, Mr. Speaker, but rather raise serious concerns on the intent and trust between our countries. And not only are they working to undermine the truth and publishing falsehoods in our newspapers, but we know that Communist China has state-sponsored actors actively working to undermine Canadian economic interests. In 2013, the former Nortel campus was taken over by the Department of National Defence. There were numerous delays in moving to the new locations, no doubt hampered by the discovery of listening devices throughout the building. Nortel was studied by cybersecurity experts who directly linked the demise of Canada's largest technology company, Nortel, to state-sponsored attacks to steal intellectual property. This information was used by foreign competitors to undercut Nortel, and investigators into cyber attacks on the firm pointed the finger directly back to Huawei, the same firm now wanting to profit and build our mobile telecommunication networks. And China has also been linked to the theft of our research discoveries and pressure tactics on Canadian university researchers. Through researchers sent by China, as well as through funding agreements, China can exert pressure on Canadian academics, steal research, and direct more opportunities back into their own institutions. In 2019, Huawei funded $56 million in academic research here in Canada. This prompted a direct warning from CSIS that there is a serious security concerns over these partnerships and the theft of research and intellectual properties. As far as I know, there are still no guidelines from the federal government on how those research agreements with Huawei and the Chinese Communist government organizations should be managed. It does raise the question, though, Mr. Speaker, if our national security and intelligence service can be concerned about research agreements, surely the infrastructure that will carry sensitive commercial, economic, and social information for the next 20 years is even more critical to protect. So why hasn't the Liberal government been able to come to a decision in the last 4 years? Is the theft of research at academic institutions more sensitive than the daily banking information, phone calls, text messages, emails, and more that travel through our work and personal phones and telecommunications infrastructure on a daily basis? Are we willing to trust that the communist regime in China won't attempt to do what they have done for decades? Use technology and cyber espionage to benefit their own companies in the state. It wasn't China's repeated violations of Canada that disrupted our relationship with the communist regime. Canada's relationship with China have been declining for many years, not just because of the threats the issue in our soil to Chinese-born Canadians with family back home, or their outright attacks on Canada through cyber-based espionage, but through their open threats toward Canada's economic interests, our social systems, and the human rights and values our country cherishes. Former Chinese Ambassador Liu warned Canada to, and I quote, "stop the moves that undermine the interests of China," end of quote. And he suggested that the arrest and detention of Huawei's CFO of Vancouver was backstabbing a friend, and warned of repercussions if the federal government banned Huawei. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, China's communist regime certainly doesn't act like a friend. They steal from us, they abuse us, they threaten Canadians, they detain our citizens in their country. That's not how our friends act. What kind of repercussions could China exact on us? Well, how about the ones they've already done? Blocking canola by two of our largest producers, Richardson International and Viterra, with false claims of pests. Blocking exports of soybeans and peas and pork and beef. The economic value of our agriculture exports to China are in excess of $5 billion. Clearly, China knows that they can hurt Canada. Our response to date has been almost nothing, Mr. Speaker. Farmers are losing their homes, some are selling their farms, and some are taking their lives. And the response from this government was nothing. Mr. Speaker, there is endless evidence of the threat that the Communist Chinese government poses to Canada by exerting their sharp power and overt attempts to hurt our economy, to push us to accept their way of doing things without questions. We would be fools to accept their abuse in the hopes that it might one day turn into a good relationship. Mr. Speaker, the proposal to strike a new committee would allow all parties in this House to work together, something I know the Liberal Prime Minister wants because he said so in his speech from the throne. He said that Canadians were expecting this of us in this House. Well, now it's time, Mr. Speaker, for the Liberals to put their words into action. Striking a special committee will let us look at all aspects of the issues: economic, diplomatic, legal, security, issues that would otherwise span many committees. We cannot allow another year to go by without action and a plan for Canada to deal with these issues. Mr. Speaker, I urge all members of this House to support the creation of the special committee and to establish it quickly so that we can get to work and address the long-standing issues between our two countries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.